Hi, I'm Valerie, and welcome to the January edit of my December lifestyle experiment. I didn't do really an intro in December, so I'm doing it now. December's experiment, I was kind of torn on what I should do, and I went through a couple different ideas. And winter is hard for me, like a lot of people. The seasonal affective disorder gets the best of me. There's less daylight. It's cold, so I don't want to do much of anything. I'm off my game in terms of my exercise regime, which also in turn then kind of puts me off my mental health game. Excuses, excuses, excuses. Um, so I wanted to do something I felt like I could accomplish, but something also that I don't do as often as I like, and that is doing sort of arts and crafts and creative practice sort of things. And it can be hard to not feel defensive. I feel a little like vulnerable, exposed underbelly here because I'm not any great artist. And to do something and then put it out there can be hard. So I want to preface kind of this by saying that, I'm trying to do things that I find esteemable and that I would like to do more of, but there is a vulnerability in it. So I recognize that, and yeah. So be kind. But also, you have to be willing to be a beginner. You may or may not have ever seen that meme that says that the first step to being really great at something is sucking really bad at it. So be willing to be a beginner. That's the mantra or the philosophy that I'm going into this with. Be willing to be a beginner and suck. Hello. It's my first week of my December challenge, which is to try to bring some creativity back into my regular practice. And I just watched my first Creative Bug class on art journaling. I'm setting the bar low because I need to feel like I can accomplish things. And that's where I am in my life right now. So my goal is essentially just to do like one lesson, watch and kind of follow along and attempt to do one lesson a week. And then hopefully at some point during the week also put into practice what I'm learning or getting examples for trying. So I just watched the first one. It was on art journaling, which is something I'm interested in. I used to journal write a lot, but I think it's interesting, the idea of adding some different elements to it. I don't know that I love this particular one that much. Dawn DeVries Sokol, I think was her name. No, shade it, Dawn. But I thought it was going to be more like how to incorporate like journaling and art as opposed to just sort of experimental doodling in a notebook. But it's okay. I'm going to try it, and I will insert a picture of somewhere in here of the first session's stuff. And I started at like an hour and a half or so ago, so not a ton of work, and it was fun and kind of distracting. So that's my first report. Hi, I'm back, and it's my second week with my creativity month challenge. Just completed my second week worth of work, and I did a watercolor project. So the class I took was Beginning Watercolor Supplies and Basic Techniques, taught by Yao Chang. And it was was okay. I enjoy playing with the watercolors. For being a beginning class, I guess they're presuming a certain level of comprehension, knowing the names of brushes and stuff. I do feel like I learned some things, like I didn't know watercolor came in tubes that you can squirt out into palettes. I didn't have those things. I just have sort of a rudimentary palette that's already pre-filled. I guess the main thing I took away from the class was sort of experimenting with unusual color combinations and just kind of getting in there and doing it. I don't know how much I felt like I actually learned from it. But I guess it was good encouragement to try things. And I did learn that I probably should have larger brushes. I learned what the favorite brushes were of the artist who taught the class, and just basically to experiment. And I guess what some of the techniques are called, like color pulling, if that's something that it's generally actually called. I didn't love the class, but you know, again, it got me doing something other than sitting on the couch. So mission accomplished, and I will make an effort to sort of play with this. I also learned that I probably should have paper. I just have a watercolor like spiral bound tablet that I had. I didn't intend to go buy a bunch of stuff. And I learned that she suggests that you have a container of water for rinsing cool colors and one for rinsing warm colors. So that's also something I hadn't heard before. But yeah, the suggestion to have loose pieces of paper, she had a block of watercolor paper, which I'd never seen before and don't have, but isn't a bad idea in terms of so that you can have a couple different paintings in progress at the same time, because you kind of get to the point where you've worked to the end of the paper that you're working on, and you just kind of, I'm sitting here because my paper is full. So if you would want to try something like this, the materials list, I just used things that I had, but if you needed to go out and get some things, whatever jars you have, one for cool wash, one for warm, some type of paint palette. Like I said, I had this one before, but it wasn't particularly expensive. I don't think you would even need this many colors. Here are the brushes that I used. She recommended like a 20, which it would be much, much bigger than this, but this is the kind of closest to what I had that she recommended. I tried this flat guy too because he's bigger, which she was recommending to help you just paint and not worry about, you know, making bigger things to start with, I think was her point. As I said, I had this. This is a Strathmore watercolor spiral bound that I had, and it's hard to tell, but the paper has kind of a grip or teeth, which kind of helps with the water sitting on top of it and not soaking it through. And then I was just practicing with kind of seeing how deep a color you can get with less water, and then adding more water to how it'll change. And then these were mixing colors, so I was mixing like a red and more of a pink together with varying degrees of water, ochres, which are always my preferred, and then sort of a deeper blue and more of a violet-y pale blue to get the same effect. And then just basically practicing with how colors sit on top of each other, how you can take a really deep color, add water to see how it washes out, how you can kind of marry two colors together, different shapes once you're allowing them to touch, how the colors bleed together, first with circles and then with triangles, obviously. And then just sort of laying down water as a technique and then adding the pigment on top, as opposed to the traditional kind of mixing in the palette. So as I said, I'll link to the Creative Bug class for each one of these. It was just kind of interesting to play with and to see how things blend together. And I do think there's something kind of magical about watercolor in that you can really have this unexpected kind of quality about it, and not just unexpected because I'm not skilled particularly, but kind of the way the pigment and the colors play together and how it kind of creates unusual color combinations. Like I ended up kind of really liking the almost coral red and how it bled out with the water with the deeper ochre colors. It was really interesting. And this kind of the pinks and the blues and the ochre together. Realized that I, about halfway through the month, ran out of juice in terms of sort of making my individual clips after each project. So I'm here. Later, Valerie is here to walk you through the other couple of projects that I did through the year, through the end of the year, through December. So I'm going to insert a picture of my dog because her laying on me on the couch is part of my excuse for often going up after I get off work, making dinner, eating dinner, sitting down on the couch, hanging out with my husband and my dog. Even though every day after work I vow to myself that I'm going to come back down and do some more work after dinner, I often get couch lock and instead just stay put and watch YouTube videos or doom scroll on my phone or watch something I don't care about on television, occasionally read, but yeah, so there's that. That's what I'm battling. That's what I'm trying to defeat, that adorable dog laying on me, warm and toasty under a blanket. But I did manage to do a few more projects throughout the month, and though I didn't watch more lessons on Creative Bug, I really need to do that. Part of this was inspired because I've had a Creative Bug membership for years, which has a monthly fee, which accrues credits for classes that I don't use. So yeah, resolutions. Either I need to cut myself off and cancel my subscription or actually use those credits. Anyway, long story, too late. Long story short, too late. One of the other projects I did was I was trying to give masks to each person in my family and make it a mask that was kind of fun and related to their interests, you know, pandemic 2020 culture. And one of the people I was trying to find a mask for was my stepmom, who is a lovely person. We share a lot of the same interests. And I wasn't really finding one that I thought met with an interest she had, but we both love vintage and we both love to sort of upcycle or recycle things. So I thought it would be fun to make her a mask. Fun to make her a mask out of some vintage fabric I had. So I assembled, you know, pins, thread, some vintage fabric scraps, which included some of the pieces that you use for seam ending. And then I took a mask that I have that I like the way it fits and used that as kind of my model. And I cut out around the fabric for the exterior, which was kind of almost an upholstery fabric that I used. And then for the interior fabric, I used more of a stretchy jersey. I thought that it was like a t-shirt material. That was actually part of another gator style mask that I have that I thought would be soft on the skin. Cut out around it and then hand sewed because, again, couch lock, and I didn't want to drag my sewing machine upstairs. So I was like, oh, I can totally hand sew this. So I did that as a project one week prior to Christmas. And then I also did a couple of small projects when was having socially distanced hangouts with friends. I love paint by number, like the vintage paint by numbers. So I have a book it's a vintage book of paint by numbers of birds, which I also love birds. So I got my whole paint set up, drug it upstairs, and did one of those at one point when I was hanging out. I did revisit and kind of marry the watercolor class and the journaling class together. So got out my pens and kind of drew on top of for like a mixed media kind of watercolor, which turned out fine. And then I also continued sort of the watercoloring when I had watercoloring. Is that a word? When I was having another hangout with another friend. And I really like the watercolor. I did find a brush that I liked a little better that seems to I feel like I have more control that I hadn't used previously. And another set of watercolor paints that I had squirreled away in another location. So another thing that I did to kind of encourage myself in my efforts to be more creative was I dug my art supplies, my paints, my pastes, my various other watercolors, markers, gel pens, various tablets and sketchbooks that I have in progress from other times when I have been more into a creative practice. And I brought them out of the art closet or the craft closet that I have downstairs, and I installed them in a little kind of banquette nook in my house that's right off the kitchen. And if I was looking for like a hangout space or I had a little time, I would go in there. And I think making those materials more accessible is going to help me use that stuff more often. So it's nice to have things tucked away or put away. And I did have them sort of organized in different boxes and bags and whatever containers, but because they aren't the easiest to get out and they aren't the most accessible downstairs in the craft closet, I think that was a deterrent. It was just that took that much longer to get to them, whereas having them readily accessible, I think will make it more likely that I use them. So did I hit my goal? Yes, because I set the bar low. I mean, sort of. I didn't do a lesson each week, but I did do at least one project a week, which was positive for me to, break out the art supplies and do something a little creative. What draws me to artistic or creative endeavors is, again, it's something that sort of pushes me out of my comfort zone. I guess I have ideas about what a creative person is, and I don't always necessarily think of myself in that way. So it's something I admire and I like to do. So it's good. And it's sort of gets me into like the flow state where you're focused on what you're doing. And I think that's a good exercise for me personally, for anyone really, to be totally present in what you're doing. So I am pleased that I, at least, 5 or 6 or 7 times out of the month, made time to do something creative that I wouldn't ordinarily have done. And hopefully I will continue to work on that practice and either do some more creative bug classes or cancel that subscription. But let me know, do you take any online creative classes? Any you would recommend? Any favorite art projects? Let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, give it a like, feel free to share it, and subscribe and hit the bell if you'd like to help my channel. Thank you, and happy 2021.